You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Excited to get started with part 2 of our weekend house calls. Hopefully you're able to join us yesterday. We answered about 8 of our community's questions. A bunch of new questions. One repeat was that which I was able to link back to a previous podcast. I'll continue to do that as well as we continue to grow the podcast, right? So today is episode 898. So all of the questions will be written in full at episode 898. That's stephencabral.com/898. And on that show note page as well, I'll put any links to things that I speak about. And of course, you can follow along as I read the questions right there as well. Always excited to be able to try to give back as much as I can, answer these questions from literally the 250,000 of one-on-one appointments now that my team and I have been able to do really over the last 18 years almost. And, it's exciting. It really is exciting to be able to take all of that data, 250,000 plus appointments, basically 20,000 appointments a year, and share that with you and just share that data with you. We have such really a vast amount of case studies that it's exciting to say, okay, we've seen this, we've seen this, we've seen this. This is what typically works. These are the lab tests that we recommend when someone has these particular symptoms. And this is how we help people get well. If this isn't working exactly well, then this is what we then move on to. So what we do is we control all of the variables. We can only control the variables, I believe, this is my opinion. And it's because we have that experience to lean on. And that's why, it really is such an amazing thing to be able to say, wow, we've been doing this now. It doesn't seem like that long for quite some time. And I just think it's like that for anyone's life when they've been doing something for that 10,000 hours, of that mastery, or they've been doing it even longer, right? Because you can usually hit 10,000 hours in about 5 years of work. Well, what if you're at 30,000 hours, which is what I've surpassed and a lot of my team members as well. And none of this would really be possible without my team members. So I want to give them the amazing shout out as well. I've got 4 amazing health coaches that you see answer all of your questions on Facebook in our private Facebook group at cabralsupportgroup.com. And they're answering your questions when you email in. They're scheduling all the appointments. They're doing the lab calls with you for anyone that purchases a lab at Equilibrium Nutrition. And so, it's really been a lot of fun. And to be honest, we're really just in the beginning to be able to help people all over the world. And the Cabral House Calls is kind of that initial first step. What I look to do on these weekend house calls is to simply give you some perspective, where to start, where you might not be looking, what you might have overlooked, and then you can move forward from there. Because it's all a journey. It honestly is. It's like you're going to figure it all out. You really will, as long as you don't give up. So, having said that, let's not give up. Let's get right into it to start the day. And Anne is up first. Nice, concise question here. Dr. Cabral, I just started into a new case of the daily nutritional support. I bought the 6 shakes where I get the 2 free, and that lasts me several months. I started the 2-week detox and have continued for the last 14 months, shake for breakfast, plant-based lunch, and reasonable dinner. I've lost 40 pounds, and it went from 160 pounds to 120 pounds. I'm so thrilled with the new me. Thank you. I'm just disappointed that the flavored change of the daily nutritional support. I got a batch a half year ago or so that was tasteless, and I found out the stevia was left out. My next batch was back to the great taste. Now this batch is pretty tasteless again. I'm wondering what the difference is now. Mostly need consistency. Okay, and great question. Very fair. And I'm always happy to take any critiques. I really am. And that's because I want to grow. I want to get better. And that's the truth. And the truth is that this is going back about a year though now. So, Anne, this is about a year ago. We had 2,500 bottles made, maybe just over that the stevia was left out. So it was just very bland. It was just a bland vegan powder. But of course, it's our all-in-one. It has the vitamins, the minerals, all that. Some people liked it, but most people liked the little bit sweeter taste. So what we did was we added back the stevia. Not quite as powerful in terms of sweetness, just enough. Because remember, all protein, if you get a raw protein, like a real protein, again, like ours is so clean, that it's all proteins are going to be a little bitter. That's the way it is. Like if your protein tastes sweet, well, there's something added to it. We don't add fructose, okay? We don't add any sugar alcohols because we work with so many people that need to fix their gut. And so we added stevia. And if you look up the amazing benefits of stevia, you won't see the blood sugar spikes. You'll see that it actually helps with bacteria in the gut. You'll see that it helps with specifically Lyme disease. So that's what we did. We added it back and it's been the same ever since. And I can tell you for sure that we just got another 10,000 bottles in and I actually taste each bottle. I really do. Like I get the new ones off the shelf and it's because I want to make sure that it's the consistency. So our manufacturer already knew it. They knew it was their fault. And we just said, hey, like we've got these 2,400 bottles and we're going to sell through those. And then we're going to get our new batch in and we'll be good to go. And now it's always the same. It's the same exact thing. And so it will never change going forward. That's the vanilla that most people like. Now, remember, it's subjective, right? So it's like you can never make 100% of people happy. That's the way it is. But, here's the thing. We have our vanilla. We don't make it very powerful. And the reason is we want people to be able to mix it into their smoothie. And you can add cinnamon to it during like the Dr. Ball detox. People love that. You can add a little bit more stevia if you want to make it sweeter. You can do whatever you want to the powder. We want to make it the best quality out there. It's a complete all-in-one. It's all of your multi, all of your minerals, your antioxidants, and 15 grams of vegan-based protein. It's the best out there. It really is for about $2 per day. I mean, you can't beat that. That's super inexpensive. So, but, hopefully we'll make you happy. And also, I just want to let you know, and this is kind of letting the cat out of the bag. Look for it, though, in about the next 6 to 8 weeks. We have our very first batch, and it will only be 2,000 bottles of chocolate coming out. It is an amazing, it's an amazing product if you love chocolate. We did our focus group. That was about 40 people. We went back and forth. We really came up with a flavor that we like. We're only doing 2,000 bottles, and it will sell out right away. We won't be able to get it back for about 2 months. But what we want to do is we want to take your opinion. Like, our community's opinion actually matters. Like, it honestly does. We're not a big corporation. We take your advice. Was it too sweet? Not sweet enough? Was it perfect? We look at the greatest amount of people, and they said this. Good. We want to serve the greatest amount of people. Then we're going to go back and we're going to order then our 10,000 bottles or whatever the minimum run is. So hopefully that helps, Anne. Thank you for the feedback. Madison's up next. Hi there. I heard your podcasts via Melissa Ambrosini, and it came at the perfect time. After running the stool sample and blood work with my local chiropractor and finding some Klebsiella pneumonia, microbial yeast overgrowth, candida, we did a standard treatment that he always prescribes. Cut out kombucha, started eating certain foods. Things got better until they didn't. And now, 6 months out, I have worse abdominal bloating and discomfort than before. Let me just see as we go through this. Seems to be IBS. Doctors saying they can't trace one food that causes the issue. Sometimes it's dairy, and sometimes it's greens, sometimes it's wheat. Things really flare up when I went to Australia and ate airplane food. Looking through this, was on a Z-Pack 3 to 4 times a year as a child. Main question is, do I need to do more testing? Or am I good to purchase the full protocol based on the blood work and stool samples I already have? Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to completely healing. P.S. It's worth mentioning that diverticulitis also runs in my family, and almost everyone has gut issues. It could be that too. All right, Madison, great question. 2 things play into this. One is you may have been able to really start to get rid of the yeast overgrowth and bacterial overgrowth, but you didn't repopulate in the correct way, which means you started using colon-based probiotics rather than the small intestinal-based probiotics first. A lot of people don't know that. That is really a big part of our Candida-based protocol as well. We put them in the correct order. I've talked about this before on how to heal Candida and SIBO and gut-based issues. Okay, so here's the deal. If you don't put in the small intestinal-based strains first, what happens is they don't populate. And if you don't populate that small intestine, well, if you put in the colon-based strains, you can actually kind of give yourself SIBO again, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, because you put in strains in the colon that shouldn't be in the small intestine because you swallow them through your mouth. So what we do is we populate that small intestine, then we kind of move in with the larger strains as well. So, well, here's what I would do. You could simply do our Candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol, or you could do an organic acids test and stool test to actually see what there is for overgrowth. That's something great you could test as well. And then never overlook stress as being a factor in diverticulitis, inflammation, and poor digestion. So always keep that and take that into consideration, is that during times of stress, if your digestion gets worse, well, then we can probably see a correlation between stress and digestion. Work on both the stress, look at a hair tissue mineral analysis, and or look at a thyroid hormone adrenal lab or just a adrenal hormone lab, and that would be a great add-on as well. Again, you can either work the protocols and not do the lab tests, or you can do the lab test and get right to the bottom of it. So, Madison, hopefully that gives you the answer that you need. Tiffany says, I'm seeing a naturopath in Australia, but a fatty lipoma under the skin. She seems to know what she's talking about. And after listening to several of your podcasts, I think she might have put me on the right path. I would like to know if you have any experience with lipomas and if you've been successful treating them. I'm 45 years old, 133 pounds, and work out 5 times a week. I'm healthy by Western medicine standards, but have gut issues and now on doctor number 4, trying to figure out what's causing lipomas to appear. Dr. Kate Brooks said they are related to blood flukes, immune gut inflammation issues, and I've been on a host of supplements and minerals for the last month. I hope this will work. I'm spending lots of money on different doctor supplements. None are their own brand, and they recommend different ones. All right, great. So here's my recommendation. Okay, so before I answer this question, what I want to do is I want to give a shout out to Melissa Ambrosini. I don't think that I express my gratitude to her enough. I think with really being a guest on her show and really talking with a lot of people over in Australia, that I've been introduced to a community of people in Australia that are some of the kindest and nicest and most open and genuine people that I've met. And so I want to give a shout out to everyone in Australia and New Zealand. We really enjoy working with you in our practice. We know it's not always easy in terms of hourly scheduling. And I just want to thank Melissa Ambrosini. And if you haven't listened to her podcast, check it out. It's called The Melissa Ambrosini Show. And her husband, Nick Broadhurst as well, who's an amazing individual in his own right and has a great podcast too, and a great new album that was just released. It really is fantastic. So check that out. And neither one of them know that I'm saying this. I'm just expressing my gratitude to them and really the new community that we've really been open up to. So much thanks, much gratitude. And now we're moving on to Tiffany's question. So I've helped many people in my practice who have lipomas. Now, lipomas are fat deposits or fatty deposits. A lot of times in the armpit, sometimes in the feet. It could be anywhere. Honestly, it can be anywhere. It can be the head, top of the head, the skull. So there's a couple things we can do internally and externally. Okay, external is never the answer, but it will help with the symptoms. We just never want them to come back. That's how we work internally. Internally, this is what I recommend. A Dr. Cabral detox to begin to purify the blood, to begin to help the liver detox at a much faster rate. If you've never heard of the Dr. Cabral detox, just listen to what a functional medicine detox is. You can, again, there's previous podcasts on that, how to do a functional medicine detox. That's a good one to start. So you want to purify the body first, okay? Then after that, we can do an intestinal cleanse, or what I'd recommend is running an organic acids test and stool test. And the reason I recommend them is a lot of people with lipomas have leaky gut or intestinal permeability issues. They have candida overgrowth, they have bacterial overgrowth. It's opening up the gut wall. It's allowing fats, proteins, and other things to come into your bloodstream. Well, that also affects the lymphatic system. When the lymphatic system gets congested, a lot of times with fat, that can create lipomas. That's one of the reasons. It's also why you see lipomas sometimes form around lymph nodes or around where lymph tends to congregate. There's no mistaking that is it's like, is there correlation, causation? Which one happens? Well, I would like to say because that lymphatic system is stagnant. So how do we help with the lymphatic system? Because I'm going to jump around here and then I'll pull it together. And the lymphatic system moves manually. It works on a manual pump, very different than this automatic pump like our heart. But believe it or not, a lymphatic system has 4 times the fluid of the blood. A lot of people have never heard about the lymphatic system. I've spoken about it many times on the podcast. Well, the lymphatic system, one of the ways to get it moving, to help to detoxify the body, to get that fat circulating, is to do dry brushing in the morning. If you've never heard of dry brushing, simply you can read about it in the Rain Barrel Effect on how to do it, or you can type in a podcast and type in dry brush. So go to stevecabral.com/podcast for any of these things you haven't heard before and type it right in the search box. All right, so dry brushing, I'll see if we can link it up here today at stevecabral.com/898. I'll do my best. But again, you always know that you have the podcast page to do the search terms. All right, dry brushing will move the lymph. You can do it for about 1 or 2 minutes right before you get in the shower in the morning. Super easy to do. You can do saunas. That works amazingly well too, because you're heating up the body, and heat will increase circulation, and it helps with detoxifying through the lymph as well. Okay, rebounding, jumping on a rebounder. So if you've never heard of that before, you can type in rebound at stephencabral.com/podcast. Self-massage, so an Ayurvedic Abhyanga, where you're moving that lymph, you're actually massaging back towards the heart, can be fantastic. And then also, if you find that you have a yeast overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth, you're going to do our Candida and bacterial overgrowth protocol, or you're a natural health doctor. Like, again, so you're working with a naturopath in Atlanta. Fantastic. Again, not everybody needs to work with us. Totally. The reason that I'm saying this is that this coming September, we're going to be debuting our certification process, and that's to certify practitioners all around the world, so that we are not the ones working with everyone, that we are recommending you to people in your local area, or maybe over Skype to other people. But we just know that there's we would love to work with everyone in the world, but obviously there's so many hours in the day, right? So you can obviously run a lab with us, and you'll always get a coaching call with that. You'll get my recommendations, but you can work with the local practitioner in your area. Organic acids test, stool test. If you have parasites, get rid of those. If you have H. pylori, get rid of that. If you have Candida, bacterial overgrowth, get rid of those. Retest, make sure it's gone. Good. Then seal up the gut. Use our CBO finisher, or what's called the Heal and Seal. That's an amazing thing. You have to seal that up. Okay. Then what can we do topically? All right, let's look topically. One of the things that works great to eliminate lipomas, fatty deposits, are actually massaging in castor oil. Okay. You can massage castor oil in first thing in the morning. Maybe you do it before you get in the shower, but definitely before bed. Okay. It's going to stain whatever clothing it might touch. So just be careful of that. So maybe you do it a couple hours before bed, and then you can wipe it off after that. But we want that castor oil to get right in there. Let it seep under the skin, right into that lipoma. That works phenomenally well too. Another thing that works great is iodine. So maybe you do a little iodine once or twice a day, and you allow that to dry into the skin. Then after that, if you wanted to, you could always massage in your castor oil, which is going to take much longer to get into the skin, okay? Works really well. There's something called a castor oil pack. You can look that up. You can look that up on my podcast page as well. That's basically castor oil covered by a heat pack, okay? Really easy to make, covered by flannel. Again, it's the castor oils wrapped in flannel with a heat pack. It opens up the pores, gets right in there. Amazing. That works amazingly well for pain and fatty tissue. Works great for constipation. Great stuff. Another thing you can use, and not a lot of people know about this one, and I don't use this, so I don't use this in my practice, but I know that people have used it before. Again, I use the castor oil, I use the iodine to get right in there. But a lot of people use what's called DMSO. It's called dimethyl sulfoxide, and dimethyl sulfoxide is it is natural, but it's a little bit of a chemical composition. And what that does is it helps to break down that lipoma as well. So again, if it was me, I would do the iodine, and then I would do the castor oil. I would probably do that heat pack as well because it feels great. And then one thing too that people get benefit from, 2 ounces of the apple cider vinegar upon waking with a little bit of water mixed in. You could add a little lemon to it if you want, a pinch of sea salt if you choose to. And people do that upon waking before bed. Seems to help as well. Again, that's more anecdotal, but I can tell you from my practice and being in clinical practice that we work on the internal, which I gave you, and then we work on the external. That was a really long answer. So I think one of the reasons why I did that is because we've gotten that a bunch of times. So what I'm always going to do now is link back to this show on how we help people with lipomas. But I apologize that I basically gave half the show to that one answer. All right, let's move on to the next one. Stephanie's up next. I'm writing in about my 9-year-old son. He has had a bad case of Keratosis Pilaris. I searched previous podcasts for Keratosis Pilaris, but couldn't find any information or expertise. He recently finished your children's CBO protocol and followed up with a gut rebuilding. The bumps on his arms are a lot better, but still has the ones on his legs. Sometimes they're worse. He has a history of antibiotics as a child. BC because of kidney problems, I believe. I'm sorry, I don't translate that well, which is why we chose to do the CBO protocol. Wondering if this is diet related or if there's something we can do to clear it up. Thank you so much for your time. Okay, Keratosis Pilaris. I actually just spoke about it on a previous podcast. Okay, Stephanie, I just looked for it on a previous podcast, and I must have answered this actually inside of our private Facebook group, which, by the way, again, everyone can join and they can search that as well. That's cabralsupportgroup.com. It just forwards over to the Facebook group. So let me answer it here on the house call, and then we'll have this as part of our Q&A as well. So Keratosis Pilaris is actually very, very common. I wouldn't consider it harmful. usually goes away by the person that is in their mid-20s, maybe 30 at the oldest. Definitely more striking in younger children. I believe that is because of the digestive system, but also because they're in a very large growth phase. So what keratosis pilaris is a buildup of keratin in the skin. And a lot of times it's usually those, bumps, white bumps. A lot of times you can see in the back of the arms, not the red bumps. Those are actually different. These are white bumps. And sometimes it's referred to actually chicken flesh or chicken skin, sometimes it's called. And what it is a buildup of the keratin, which is basically protein that helps build up the skin and helps actually protect it from its environment. That's why I think we do see it more in children. They're more of that anabolic phase, that growth-based phase. However, I will tell you, because it can be on any part of a child's body, it can really sometimes get really overgrown. And although it doesn't seem to be harmful and it's idiopathic, which means we don't exactly know why, I can tell you how we get rid of it, which might give you an interest or inkling into how it might be caused. So we see most people with keratosis pilaris actually sensitive to dairy, sometimes eggs as well. Not as much gluten, although gluten could be a big sensitivity. We see it with eggs, and we do see it with dairy. So what we do is we do an elimination diet. For 3 weeks, we have basically gluten and dairy and corn and soy and milk products and eggs cut off a child's diet. I know that can seem challenging, but then you can actually see, does it work, yes or no? And if you're willing to do that for 2 or 3 weeks, you'll be able to see if it's a food sensitivity, and usually it is. So I just want to say that, just want to throw that out there. Let's say you don't want to eliminate it for 3 weeks. What you might want to do is a food sensitivity test. And you can do this with a child. I've done it with both of my girls, and we get to see their food sensitivities. We just simply give them a little finger poke, put the drops of blood on a card, and then we mail it in. So again, is it kids' favorite thing to do? No, but we get to see their food sensitivities, and we might never have known that one of my daughters was more sensitive to eggs because she didn't have necessarily any outward or overt symptoms of an egg-based allergy. However, when we ran that test, we can see when she eats eggs, specifically egg whites, it's causing inflammation in her body. So what we did was we eliminated those for right now. And when we do have them with her, because we'll retest in the future as well, that we have them baked or cooked in something which is going to be a little less invasive to the body. So a couple of other things that work really well with keratosis pilaris is increasing the amount of omega-3s in a child or adult's diet. How can that be done? Well, it can be done through more vegan-based sources if you want. Sure, chia seeds, flax seeds, but sometimes those could be a sensitivity just because of lectin. So you might want to check that. Okay. So what we do is if you're able to do fish oil or your child likes fish, well, then we could do that. Borage oil could be great as well. So you can look into those specific things. We have a liquid omega-3 for children as well that you can just mix into food. You can put it in a smoothie. You can do whatever you'd like, make it into a smoothie bowl. The other thing that we do is we try to get a little bit of a cleansing things for a child. And that's typically like a greens. Will they do a little bit of green juice? What if it has a carrot in it? Would they do that as well? Or what if we put a little bit of green apple in there? Would they do that? So those are very cleansing for the body. What works as a topical treatment? A topical treatment can be great when we use apple cider vinegar. It's kind of a cure-all, right? It's like Windex or duct tape, right? But apple cider vinegar actually is a great toner. And that's why it's so good to put on your face. Not so good. It's good for the right people. If you have an oily face, after you wash your face, apple cider vinegar could be a good toner. And that's before you put on some type of moisturizer as well, such as a very good oil. Okay, so apple cider vinegar, really, really great. You can scrub the back of the arm just with a loofah, of course, not too hard. And then you can apply the apple cider vinegar. And you're welcome to pat it dry. If it irritates your child after the apple cider vinegar has kind of soaked in and dried, you could wash off the back of the arm. That would be okay. And the other thing that works well, if you want to add a moisturizer after the apple cider vinegar, which is what I would do, I would then apply some coconut oil. And then you can see how that reacts to the body. Now, what do I always do? I always test variables. So what does that mean? Well, I would do the apple cider vinegar first, check. Is it helping after 3 days or so? Okay, seems to be helping, or at least it's not harming. Now let's add the coconut oil on top of that at night as a moisturizer. We don't need to do a ton, just apply it over the keratosis pilaris. If we do the elimination diet, or we do a organic acids test or stool test, check the gut, we do a food sensitivity test, just if you don't believe that dairy or eggs or gluten or any of these foods might be a sensitivity, you could test. Again, have your child eat eggs, dairy, and gluten, and any other foods they typically eat for a day or two before you take the lab test, and then take the lab test. And again, that will be linked up at today's show notes at stephencabral.com/898, and that's the IgG sensitivity test. So hopefully that was the answer that helps. And now I can always link back to keratosis pilaris. The only thing that means, though, is that's the end of our time today. So I know we didn't get to as many questions, but I think we went a little deeper, right? We went a little bit more into the questions and So I do hope that this was helpful. If it wasn't as helpful as answering more questions, but not going as deep, always let me know as well. I want your feedback. I really do. I consider the Cabral Concept podcast not my podcast, it's the community's podcast. And I want to give you what you feel will be the most beneficial. So thank you everyone for the listens, of course. And I appreciate everyone that has left a review on iTunes. Every little bit helps us spread our message. So if you haven't left a review, if you're able to do that, even if it's only one sentence, I would, of course, appreciate that. Thank you so much. Please do feel free to pass this show on to anyone you believe it could help. Ever wonder what the best sauna, blue blockers, sleep trackers, wake lights, salt lamps, or other health gadgets are? Or what about the top non-toxic mattresses, sheets, soaps, bath products, toothpaste, and cookware? Or would you like to know the cleanest choices for hemp parts, meal delivery services, supplements, and much more? I personally curated, researched, and now created a resource page of all of my top picks that continues to grow each week. These are the exact products I use in my own life, with my family, in my private practice, and they're the ones I trust. To find out all of my up-to-date recommendations and all the details, simply head on over to stevencabral.com/resources.